The Garden of Whispering Echoes. The morning sun didn't just rise over the valley of Oakhaven. It seemed to spill over the mountain peaks like liquid gold, saturating the world in a warm, honey-hued glow. Elias sat on his porch, a steaming mug of jasmine tea cradled in his hands, watching the mist dance between the silver birch trees. For the first time in 20 years, Elias had nowhere to be, no deadlines to meet, and no emails to answer. He had finally retired to the edge of the woods, a place he had dreamed of since he was a young man sketching trees in the margins of his notebooks. Oakhaven was the kind of town where people still waved from their bicycles and knew the specific shade of blue you liked for your mailbox. It was a place where time felt less like a racing river and more like a quiet pond. Elias took a slow sip of his tea, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He looked at the overgrown plot of land behind his cottage. To anyone else, it was a mess of brambles and wild ivy. To Elias, it was a canvas. The first seed. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with a single shovel, a pair of worn leather gloves, and a packet of wildflower seeds. Elias spent his first week clearing the debris. It was hard physical labor that made his muscles ache in a way that felt honest and rewarding. Every stone he moved and every weed he pulled felt like he was shedding a layer of his old, stressful life. One Tuesday afternoon, while he was kneeling in the dirt, a small voice chirped from behind the fence. "Are you building a castle?" Elias looked up to see a young girl with pigtails and a face full of freckles. It was Maya, the daughter of the local baker. "Not a castle," Elias smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "A garden, but a garden can be a kingdom if you treat it right." Maya tilted her head. "Does it have dragons?" "Only the friendly green ones," Elias joked, pointing to a small lizard sunning itself on a rock. From that day on, Elias wasn't alone. Maya became his self-appointed apprentice, followed eventually by her father, Leo, who would bring fresh sourdough bread in exchange for gardening tips. Then came Mrs. Higgins from down the road, who contributed cuttings from her famous prize-winning roses. A tapestry of growth. By midsummer, the Garden of Whispering Echoes, as the neighborhood had taken to calling it, was a riot of color. There were deep purples of lavender that drew in hummingbirds by the dozen, bright yellow sunflowers that stood like sentinels against the fence, and a winding path made of smooth river stones. But it wasn't just the plants that were growing. The garden had become a communal heartbeat. On Friday evenings, neighbors would wander over with lemonade and folding chairs. They talked about things that mattered, the books they were reading, the dreams they still had, and the small triumphs of their children. Elias realized that he hadn't just planted flowers. He had planted a sanctuary. He watched as Mrs. Higgins taught Maya how to prune a rosebush without getting pricked, and how Leo found peace after a long day at the hot ovens by simply sitting under the willow tree. The air in the garden always felt 5 degrees cooler and infinitely lighter than the world outside. The midnight bloom. The highlight of the summer was the arrival of the moon-glow lily, a rare flower Elias had nurtured from a bulb sent by an old friend. It was said to bloom only once a year, opening its petals under the light of the full moon. As the night of the full moon approached, the excitement in Oakhaven was palpable. Elias decided to host a moonlight gala. No fancy clothes or formal invitations, just lanterns hung from the trees, a few acoustic guitars, and the company of friends. When the moon finally climbed to its zenith, casting a pearlescent light over the valley, the garden was silent. Everyone gathered around the small pond where the lilies sat. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the white petals began to unfurl. It released a fragrance so sweet and pure, it felt like a physical embrace. In that moment, standing among his neighbors, Elias felt a profound sense of gratitude. He realized that the beauty of the flower wasn't just in its appearance, but in the fact that they were all there to witness it together. The whispering echoes weren't ghosts of the past, they were the sounds of laughter and friendship echoing into the future. The endless season. As autumn began to paint the leaves in shades of amber and crimson, the garden changed, but it didn't fade. The sunflowers bowed their heads to provide seeds for the birds, and the crisp air brought a new kind of energy. Elias sat on his porch again, the same jasmine tea in his hand, looking at the community he had helped foster. He realized that life, much like his garden, wasn't about the final harvest. It was about the daily act of tending to the soil, the patience required for growth, and the joy of sharing the beauty with others. He had spent years running toward a finish line, only to find that the most beautiful things happen when you finally stop to plant your feet. The sun set behind the mountains, leaving a trail of pink and violet clouds. Elias smiled, closed his eyes, and listened to the wind whispering through the trees. It was a perfect day, in a series of perfect days, in a life that had finally found its bloom. Clouds. Elias smiled, only to find that the most beautiful things happen when you finally stop to plant your feet. The sun set behind the mountains, leaving a trail of pink and violet clouds. Elias smiled, closed his eyes, and listened to the wind whispering through the trees. It was a perfect day, in a series of perfect days, in a life that had finally found its bloom.